Metaphysics. Have you ever paused to wonder why reality is the way it is? Why does anything exist at all instead of nothing? These questions might seem simple, but they belong to one of philosophy's oldest and most profound branches, metaphysics. Despite how complex the word may sound, metaphysics is simply the study of reality itself. It goes beyond science and physics. While science explains how things happen, metaphysics asks what it really means for something to exist. This line of thought dates back to ancient Greece, particularly to the philosopher Aristotle. Interestingly, the term metaphysics originally just meant after physics, because Aristotle wrote about these ideas after his works on motion, matter, and other physical topics. Over time, however, the term took on a much deeper meaning, becoming philosophy's way of exploring the ultimate nature of reality. Metaphysics is generally divided into two main areas. The first is called ontology, which is the study of what exists. Ontologists ask whether things like beauty, justice, or numbers truly exist on their own, or if they're just concepts we've created in our minds. For instance, does something like redness exist independently? Or is it only real because we see red objects? The second area of metaphysics focuses on more personal and mysterious questions about consciousness, the nature of the mind, free will, and whether anything exists beyond the physical world. These questions might not have simple or definitive answers, but they deeply influence how we think about ourselves and our place in the universe. Even though metaphysics doesn't always offer concrete answers like science does, it invites us to think more deeply. It reminds us that behind the ordinary events of daily life lies a profound mystery, the mystery of existence itself. And that's what makes metaphysics so captivating. You don't need to be a philosopher to explore it. All it takes is a bit of curiosity and a willingness to look more closely at the world around you. Dualism. When you feel pain, is it just your brain processing electrical signals? Or is there something deeper, something non-physical, like a soul or mind? This is where dualism enters the picture. Dualism is the philosophical view that reality is made up of two fundamentally different kinds of substance, the physical and the mental. It draws a clear line between the body and the mind, the brain and consciousness. According to dualists, your thoughts, emotions, and memories aren't just the result of chemical reactions. They belong to a separate, non-material mind. One of the most well-known proponents of dualism was the 17th century philosopher René Descartes. He likened the body to a machine, governed by physical laws, while the mind was something entirely different, something invisible, indivisible, and capable of independent thought. In his view, the body and mind interact, but they are not the same thing. To picture this, imagine a driver in a car. The car can move, accelerate, and stop, but it doesn't decide where to go. The driver does. In dualism, your body is the car, and your mind is the driver. But this analogy raises tough questions. If the mind is non-physical, how does it influence the body? How can an immaterial thought cause a physical hand to move? This puzzle is known as the mind-body problem, and it's one of the most enduring challenges in philosophy. Even today, dualist ideas appear in our everyday thinking. We often talk about body and soul, or describe someone as being trapped in their mind. Despite major advances in neuroscience, the question remains, is the mind simply the brain, or is it something more? Dualism doesn't claim to solve every mystery. It starts with a simple but powerful observation. the mental and the physical feel fundamentally different. From that, it builds one of philosophy's most persistent theories. Arche everything, oceans, stars, even our own thoughts, must come from somewhere. But what if you asked a deeper question? What was the very first thing? The true beginning of everything? That's exactly what ancient Greek philosophers tried to uncover when they developed the idea of arche. In Greek, arche refers to the fundamental principle or substance from which everything originates. Imagine the universe as a giant building. Then arche would be the raw material it was built from. The bricks, the beams, the foundation. Different early thinkers had different answers. Thales, one of the first philosophers, believed that everything came from water, not because everything is literally wet, but because he observed water as a constant and vital presence in life, in rivers, rain, even within us. To him, it made sense as a unifying element. Others had different ideas. Anaximenes thought it was air, Heraclitus chose fire, and Anaximander proposed something even more abstract, a boundless, undefined source he called the apeiron. These weren't just guesses. They were early attempts to explain the universe using reason and observation, long before the tools of modern science. In fact, these philosophical foundations eventually influenced physics and cosmology. Arche represents the desire to seek truth, not through myths or stories, but through thought and logic. And even today, scientists and philosophers continue to ask similar questions. What is everything made of? Where did it all begin? Though ancient, the concept of arche taps into a timeless human curiosity, the need to understand the origin of everything we know. Beauty. You see a sunset, hear a melody, or gaze at a painting, and something just clicks. It feels beautiful. But what exactly is beauty? In philosophy, beauty is a key concept in aesthetics, the study of what we find visually, emotionally, or intellectually pleasing. It's often tied to harmony, balance, or meaning. Yet beauty is one of the oldest and most debated ideas in human thought. Some philosophers argue that beauty is objective, that there are universal qualities like symmetry or proportion that naturally appeal to us. This is why certain patterns in nature or classical art consistently feel beautiful, even across cultures. Others insist that beauty is subjective, depending on individual taste and cultural background. What one person finds elegant, another might find dull. Styles and standards of beauty also shift over time. What's admired in one era or culture may not be in another. But beauty isn't limited to the visual. It can also be emotional or intellectual. A powerful story, a groundbreaking theory, or a clever argument can be described as beautiful when they feel coherent, meaningful, or deeply satisfying. From Plato to Kant, many thinkers have tried to pin down the essence of beauty. But it remains mysterious. It touches something instinctive in us, something we recognize as valuable even when we can't fully explain why. Whether it comes from nature, art, or ideas, beauty resonates because it speaks to both our senses and our souls. Ontology asks a deceptively simple question. What actually counts as real? Things like rocks, trees, or your phone might seem like obvious examples of what exists. But what about less tangible things, like time, numbers, or love? Do they exist in the same way as physical objects? These are exactly the kinds of questions ontology tries to explore. As a branch of philosophy within metaphysics, ontology focuses on understanding the most fundamental categories of being. Rather than just asking what things are made of, Ontology digs deeper, asking what kinds of things can exist at all. Is the universe made up entirely of physical objects, or do abstract entities like ideas, emotions, or mathematical concepts also belong to reality? A central concept in ontology is the distinction between particulars and universals. Particulars are specific, individual things, like your cat or this one chair. Universals, on the other hand, are general qualities that multiple things can share, such as redness, roundness, or softness. Ontologists debate whether these universals are actual things that exist independently, or if they're simply convenient labels our minds use to categorize experience. Ontology also raises questions about identity and change. One classic example is the ship of Theseus. If you replace every part of a ship, piece by piece, is it still the same ship? While it sounds like a riddle, it's actually a serious ontological question about how objects persist or change over time. Interestingly, ontology has also found its way into modern technology. In computer science and artificial intelligence, an ontology refers to a structured system that helps organize and connect knowledge. These frameworks allow machines to understand how pieces of information relate to one another, essentially helping them make sense of reality. At its core, ontology is about building a map of existence. It helps us divide and categorize the world, even when those divisions aren't as clear as they first seem. And by doing so, ontology silently shapes how we understand everything around us. Expressionism. Not all art aims to be pleasant, polished, or realistic. Sometimes it's raw, distorted, or even jarring, because its goal isn't to mirror the outside world, but to reveal what's happening inside the artist. This is the core of Expressionism. Expressionism is an artistic and philosophical movement that puts emotion at the center of creativity. Rather than striving for accuracy or realism, expressionist art seeks to communicate deep, often intense, inner feelings, like fear, anger, joy, or anxiety. In visual art, this might mean exaggerated features, wild brushstrokes, or clashing colors. A figure might be misshapen not due to lack of skill, but to better express emotional turmoil. In music, expressionism shows up in jarring dissonance or sudden tempo shifts. In literature, it could take the form of fragmented narratives or surreal, dreamlike imagery. The philosophy behind expressionism is that art is a direct channel from the artist's inner world to the audience. The goal isn't to present an objective reality, but to project a personal reality, an emotional truth that resonates, even if it's hard to explain. Expressionism became especially influential in early 20th century Europe during times of war and upheaval. Artists used it to respond to a world that felt unstable and fractured. But the idea itself stretches beyond that era. It appears wherever emotion takes priority over technique, and feeling matters more than form. Expressionism expands our understanding of art. It reminds us that art isn't just about how things look, it's about how things feel. It challenges us to look beyond surface beauty and connect with the emotional depths beneath. Idealism, close your eyes, and the world seems to vanish. But what if it actually does? This is the strange and thought-provoking claim at the heart of idealism. In philosophy, idealism is the belief that reality is fundamentally mental. That is, everything we experience, objects, space, time, is constructed from ideas or perceptions in the mind. Idealists argue that the physical world doesn't exist independently of our experience of it. It exists because it's being perceived, thought about, or consciously observed. One of the most influential idealists was the 18th century philosopher George Berkeley. He claimed that what we think of as matter doesn't exist on its own. Take a tree, for example. You might assume it's a physical object out there in the world, waiting to be seen. But Berkeley argued the tree exists only because it's being perceived by you, by others, or by some higher consciousness. To him, to be is to be perceived. This idea feels counterintuitive. We usually think of the world as solid, objective, and independent. But idealism challenges that assumption. Consider your dreams. While you're dreaming, the people, places, and events feel vividly real. Yet they exist entirely within your mind. Idealists suggest that waking life might be similar, just more stable and collectively shared. There are different versions of idealism. Some propose that everything is made of consciousness. Others suggest that the mind has built-in structures that shape how we perceive and organize reality, like mental lenses we can't take off. But all forms of idealism share one core belief. The mind is not just part of reality. It is the foundation of it. Idealism invites us to rethink what real means. It turns our usual assumptions upside down, suggesting that ideas aren't floating above the material world. They are the material world. Formalism. A painting doesn't need to tell a story or make a political statement to be considered great. According to formalism, what truly matters in art is form, its visual structure, not its content. Formalism is a theory in aesthetics that emphasizes the value of an artwork's elements: line, color, texture, composition, rhythm, and balance. From this perspective, a piece isn't judged by what it represents, but by how it's constructed. The focus is on how the parts come together to create an aesthetic experience. For example, a painting of a tree isn't appreciated because it resembles a tree, but because of the harmony of colors, the interaction of lines, or the texture of the brushwork. The same logic applies to music, architecture, and literature, where patterns, form, and structure matter more than message or meaning. Art critic Clive Bell famously argued that what makes art powerful is its significant form, the arrangement of elements that provoke an emotional response. In literary formalism, critics study the rhythm, language, and structure of a text rather than the author's intent or historical context. Critics of formalism argue that it oversimplifies art, stripping away its emotional, historical, or cultural dimensions. They say ignoring content can miss the deeper purpose of the work. But formalists counter that sometimes the pure experience of form itself is what gives art its power, and meaning can even distract from that. Formalism invites us to slow down, observe more closely, and appreciate art for its craftsmanship and inner design, not just its message. Taste. Some people love abstract art. Others find it meaningless. One person's favorite movie might bore someone else to tears. These differences come down to something we casually call taste. In philosophy, taste refers to our personal judgments about beauty, art, and aesthetic value. It shapes what we like and why. But taste isn't just about random preferences. Philosophers have long asked whether it can be refined, trained, or even judged as better or worse. This idea became especially important in 18th century European thought. Thinkers like David Hume and Immanuel Kant explored how people can disagree about beauty, yet still believe some opinions are more insightful or discerning than others. At first glance, taste seems purely subjective, just a matter of personal likes and dislikes. But Hume suggested that good taste comes from experience, sensitivity, and the ability to notice subtle details. Like a skilled wine taster, someone with refined taste can appreciate nuances others miss. Kant added a new layer. He observed that when we say something is beautiful, we speak as if others should agree, even though we know they might not. That's because taste, while grounded in personal feeling, carries a kind of universal expectation. We don't just feel beauty. We believe others should feel it too. Taste, then, is where emotion, culture, and judgment meet. It reflects our background, our experiences, and our personal growth. It helps us make sense of art, design, and even everyday choices. And while it's deeply personal, it also reveals the shared patterns that shape how we experience the world. The sublime imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, watching a thunderstorm roll across the ocean. You feel something more than just beauty, something vast, overwhelming, and awe-inspiring. That powerful sensation is what philosophers call the sublime. The sublime describes experiences that are intense, immense, or even terrifying, yet deeply moving. Unlike ordinary beauty, which is often calming and pleasant, the sublime confronts you with something so grand that it stirs a mix of wonder and fear. It doesn't aim to comfort. It shakes you, reminding you of how small you are compared to the universe. The idea of the sublime became a major topic in 18th century philosophy. Edmund Burke connected it to feelings of fear and greatness, like standing before mountains or watching a violent storm. Immanuel Kant later added that the sublime is what happens when the mind tries to grasp something so huge or complex it can't quite comprehend it. But it tries anyway. Importantly, the sublime isn't limited to nature. You can experience it in art, architecture, or abstract ideas. A massive cathedral, a dark and haunting painting, or a story about the endlessness of time can evoke that same feeling of awe and unease. The experience of the sublime is a kind of paradox. It makes you feel small, but not powerless. Instead, you feel connected to something beyond yourself. It's not fear in the usual sense. It's fear mixed with curiosity, distance, and wonder. The sublime reminds us that not all beauty is soft or sweet. Some beauty is wild, intense, and nearly overwhelming. It challenges our emotional limits and invites us to explore what lies beyond our usual understanding. Monism. Most of us see the world as a collection of separate things: people, animals, buildings, objects. Everything seems divided and distinct. But there's an ancient idea that turns this view upside down. It's called monism, and it suggests that all of reality is actually one single, unified thing. Monism comes from the Greek word for single. In philosophy, it's the belief that everything, your thoughts, your body, the stars and the sky, is made of one fundamental substance or principle. That might sound abstract, but the idea is surprisingly simple. Instead of dividing reality into mind and matter, or body and soul, monism says there's only one thing, just appearing in different forms. There are several versions of monism. Material monism holds that everything is physical, that the universe is made purely of matter. Idealist monism flips that and suggests everything is mental, like one vast interconnected consciousness. Then there's neutral monism, which argues that reality is neither purely physical nor purely mental, but something more basic that gives rise to both. To get a feel for monism, imagine a wave in the ocean. You can point to it and call it a separate thing, but it's still just ocean, momentarily shaped in a unique form. That's how monism sees us, not as separate beings, but as temporary expressions of one endless whole. This isn't just a philosophical theory. It's influenced entire cultures. Eastern traditions like Advaita Vedanta embrace monistic thinking, and even some areas of modern physics explore similar ideas about the underlying unity of the universe. Monism doesn't ask you to ignore differences. It simply invites you to look deeper, beneath the surface, and consider whether everything that seems separate might, at its core, be one. Communitarianism. When people talk about rights, they often focus on the individual, your freedom, your voice. Communitarianism, however, shifts the spotlight to the broader community that shapes those individuals. This philosophy emphasizes shared values, collective responsibility, and the common good. It sees people not as isolated agents, but as deeply influenced by their families, cultures, and local networks. Society, in this view, isn't just a collection of individuals. It's a web of relationships that gives life its meaning and stability. Communitarian thinkers argue that too much focus on personal freedom can weaken social bonds and leave people feeling isolated. While they don't reject individual rights, they stress that those rights are most meaningful when rooted in mutual care and responsibility. For example, free speech remains important, but its use should consider the health of the broader community. Similarly, economic freedom, like running a business, should be balanced with social impact and ethical responsibility. In practical terms, communitarianism promotes civic engagement, public education, local governance, and community building. It encourages people to be active citizens, not just voters, but contributors to public life. Philosophers like Charles Taylor and Michael Sandel argue that real understanding comes from recognizing the cultural and historical contexts that shape people's values. Communitarianism ultimately challenges us to find a balance between personal liberty and social connection, showing that true freedom often grows from shared purpose and cooperation. Philosophy of life. Spending time with family, relaxing before bed. These everyday moments often hide a deeper question. What is it all for? That's where the philosophy of life comes in. Rather than being a single theory, the philosophy of life is a broad, reflective approach to understanding the meaning, direction, and value of human existence. It encourages us to consider life's big questions. What does it mean to live well? What gives life meaning? How should we face pain, joy, success, or death? Unlike specific fields like ethics or metaphysics, the philosophy of life draws from a wide range of sources: ancient traditions, personal experience, and practical wisdom. For example, Stoicism teaches endurance and emotional control, while existentialism emphasizes personal freedom and the challenge of finding meaning in a vast, uncaring universe. Other perspectives focus on serving others, finding happiness, or living in harmony with nature. This kind of thinking often overlaps with religion, psychology, and the arts. It's not just about ideas. It's about everyday choices, how we spend our time, treat others, and face setbacks. These decisions reflect deeper beliefs about what life should be. Importantly, the philosophy of life isn't reserved for scholars. Writers, scientists, artists, and everyday people all contribute to the ongoing conversation. It's personal, adaptable, and always evolving. Rather than giving final answers, it encourages people to look inward and reflect deeply on existence itself. Ultimately, the philosophy of life shapes not just how we think, but how we live. It influences our values, habits, and what we believe truly matters in the long run. Socialism. In many societies, a small group, often takes the largest share of rewards, despite the collective efforts of many. Socialism offers an alternative vision. It's a political and economic philosophy centered on the idea that key resources, such as factories, land, and natural assets, should be owned or regulated by the community rather than private individuals. At its heart, socialism strives to reduce inequality by ensuring a more equitable distribution of wealth. It's built on the belief that essentials like healthcare, education, and housing should be available to all, not just to those who can afford them. This usually involves a stronger role for the government in managing services and regulating markets. However, socialism comes in many forms, ranging from democratic systems to more centralized economic models. Unlike capitalism, where markets and profit motives drive production, socialism emphasizes cooperation and communal benefit. For example, a publicly funded transportation system that prioritizes access over profit aligns with socialist values. Some socialist approaches even support worker-run businesses and participatory planning, where communities shape local economies. These models argue that democracy should go beyond voting. It should influence the workplace and the economy itself, while debates continue over how much power should lie with the state versus individuals. The core goal of socialism remains the same: a fairer, more inclusive economy built on shared prosperity. Artistic expression: a film, a dance, a painting. These aren't just things we observe. They're powerful forms of artistic expression, revealing something deeper about what it means to be human. In philosophy, artistic expression goes beyond just creating beautiful objects. It's about communicating thoughts, emotions, and perspectives that often can't be expressed through ordinary language. Artists use tools like color, sound, movement, and form as their own kind of language. But expression isn't limited to the artist's inner world. It's about creating a shared experience. A haunting melody might convey grief, a sculpture might embody serenity, or a photograph might reflect a moment of political unrest. What matters is how the work channels the artist's intent into something the audience can feel or relate to. Philosophers have debated whether artistic expression depends more on the artist's intention or the audience's interpretation. Is it about what the creator meant to say, or what the audience actually experiences? Either way, expression is central to how we define and value art. Artistic expression also invites tough questions. Can a painting made by a machine be truly expressive? What about art produced under commercial pressure? These challenges help philosophers explore the boundaries of creativity and authenticity. Ultimately, artistic expression is a bridge between the personal and the universal. It transforms inner experience into something visible, audible, or tangible, something that invites others in, and in doing so, becomes a uniquely human way of communicating who we are: justice. We often say justice has been served when someone gets what they deserve. But in philosophy, justice is more than reward or punishment. It's about creating a fair and balanced society. Justice means treating everyone fairly and giving people what they're due. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet defining what's fair is one of philosophy's most enduring debates. One major framework is distributive justice, which looks at how resources like wealth, education, and healthcare should be shared. Should everyone get the same, or should distribution be based on effort or need? Another is retributive justice, which focuses on fair punishment for wrongdoing. The idea is not revenge, but proportionate, just consequences for harmful actions. Then there's procedural justice, which emphasizes the fairness of processes. Even if outcomes vary, justice depends on whether rules are clear, unbiased, and consistently applied, especially in courts, institutions, and decision-making systems. Philosophers like Plato, John Rawls, and Amartya Sen have offered different models of justice. For instance, Rawls imagined designing society without knowing one's future position in it to ensure fairness for all. At its core, justice is about how we treat each other. It involves balancing rights, responsibilities, and needs, so that society works not just for a few, but for everyone.